So thank you, Steve. It's great to be back. As Steve mentioned, I've become a bit of a recurring character here. But I really do, and I just want to kind of speak to something that Steve said before, as a brand marketer. Really the intimacy of these events. There's a reason I keep coming back, and I'm so grateful to be invited back. Because it's really, when you think about like marketing, we go a lot of the same events, and I feel like there's not always like actionable insights and fruitful conversation we have. But here it's very curated. It's very engaged, it's very involved, and like Steve said, you feel like you're special, it's personalized. And as marketers, I think we can appreciate that. And that's something we'll talk about today, right, which is all kind of tied to your first-party data recipe. So again, I just want to thank the Media Post folks, and we have a great panel for you guys today. Almost kind of a continuation of one of the ones we did in Santa Barbara, those of you that were there, really talking about kind of the emergence of zero-party data. And that's kind of what we're talking about again, because it's all about data. We're surrounded by data. I was just at a roundtable with one of my vendors, and I made the mistake of calling us, I was like, all of us are like data companies today. And he cringed at that. And I'm like, well, it's true. Whether we want to admit it or not, as CPGs, right, there's just this abundance of data that we have. And sometimes that varies, and I think this is what we'll get really great perspective on today, represented by kind of your large portfolio CPG and the DTCs that kind of keep me up at night. I sleep relatively well, thankfully, but metaphorically, if I was staying up at night, late at night, some of the things that would kind of challenge us. So we're going to cover a lot of different things, from loyalty, fandom, direct-to-consumer, kind of the advantages of being large-scale, small-scale, agile, and really just the challenges of having and sitting on so much data, right? Decision paralysis, right? There's a lot of different things I think all of our brands can kind of relate to. But before we jump in, I would love to kind of introduce, or have our panelists introduce themselves, their companies, and their current positions. So, Robyn, you want to take it away?
Hi, I'm Robyn DeFina. I'm a CPG brand veteran, having scaled a number of brands from pretty much niche brands to mainstream kind of national brands, primarily with Annie's, Once Upon a Farm, and now Sweet Loren's. Sweet Loren's, if you're not aware of, but thank you, Steve, for the awesome shout out. We are not just a vegan brand. We are actually an allergen-free brand that is going to transform all your expectations for what an allergen-free brand can do. We are taste first. So as Steve mentioned, there is no taste compromise. So we are going to be this next modern day brand for all consumers that everyone can enjoy. So, thank you for having me.
Yeah, great to have you. Loren?
Great. Hi, everybody. Good morning. My name is Loren Flanigan. Different Loren than yesterday's panel, so I won't be whispering, but shout out to you for getting through that. That was really impressive. Yeah, give it up for you again. I don't know where you are, but really amazing.
It's not easy.
I actually have a new role. I know that this is reflecting my prior role, but just a few weeks ago, I just transitioned to our global brand team. So I'm currently leading global brand marketing for Trident and Halls, or Gum Brands and Halls at Mondelēz. Have been at Mondelēz for about 9 years, working in a variety of capacities, from this role, my prior role, where I was responsible for partnerships and managing our relationships with the likes of like NCAA, NBA, and a bunch of portfolio losing my train of thought here, portfolio promotions and sweepstakes, which I'll speak to, as well as they have some resonance with first-party data. Also some experience on a direct-to-consumer business, and then otherwise all traditional brand roles on brands like Oreo and some others. So excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Good morning. My name is Katie Green, and I run marketing for a company called Little Saints, which, unlike some of these larger brands, is a 2-year-old company. We are primarily direct-to-consumer, and we create non-alcoholic mushroom-fueled beverages. And so what we're really trying to do is kind of change the paradigm of how people are socializing, so people can still continue to go out and have fun and still wake up feeling good the next day. So trying to make these two things not necessarily so mutually exclusive.
Awesome. So it's great to have everyone. And I'll start off, and Loren, I think I'll start with you, just because I think we have a lot of appreciation for Mondelēz. Our office is like 20 minutes down the road from where they are in New Jersey, so we have a lot of kind of affinity for them. We share some similar agencies. And so I think traditionally, as a big kind of CPG, we're inundated with data, right? And traditionally, like, it was always bought, right? And like, I see that in my role. Most of the data that I look at through social media is third party, right? You have to go out and collect it, or you purchase it, or license to be able to collect this. But I think, and we've seen the transformation of like, oh, now there's whole dedicated teams to first-party data collection. So with that, Loren, I'd love to hear like how you guys are approaching integration of data, because I think that's so hard to kind of figure out, right? It's not as kind of clear-cut. I find like there's a kind of this convergence of, really good marketers that they'll pull from different teams to essentially be on a task force, and maybe that's different in Mondelēz, but I feel like that's where we've kind of struggled too, is to put the right people in the right place. And when you boil it down to collection, I feel like it's very, very clear, like whether or not you run into challenges with data collection, right, in its simplest form. But would love to share some insight from Mondelēz, especially with so many brands.
Yeah, we have tons of brands. So for those who aren't familiar, we have brands like Oreo, Ritz Crackers, Sour Patch Kids, a bunch of others. I will just plug that Oreo is technically vegan. So as amazing as Sweet Loren's is, you do have other options too.
Did you hear that, Steve?
But so our first-party data strategy is something that honestly we're still evolving. Like many other CPG companies, we don't own that direct point of sale, right? Like that is your Walmarts, your Targets, so on and so forth. So we really have to look for ways to add value to the consumers in exchange for that data. So for us, that looks like having a direct-to-consumer presence that is really going to be a lot different than some of the DTCs that have started that way. We have a dedicated DTC for Oreo in particular, and in thinking about that value exchange, it's about finding ways to offer something that you can't find in stores, so something premium, something customized. Other ways that we've gone about it in terms of collection are what I mentioned earlier with promotion. So with NCAA, for example, long-standing relationship as a partner, we've always activated around March Madness. We'll do a sweeps every year. Another great way to gather some of that data. And then some of the other ways that we've thought about collection are lead gen campaigns, where we're specifically asking for that input in exchange for a giveaway or some kind of early access. So that's how we've thought about, first of all, just getting the data. That's really the biggest step for us because we don't own that point of sale. And rewards programs are another way. So once we've got the data, then it's all about organizing it and trying to find ways to action it. And that's where we're still on the earlier side of things. We've started to do some campaigns that have been informed by zero-party or first-party data insights. And we're just still in test mode with that, but are actually seeing some really good performance in the first two that we've run. And then to answer your question about the team dynamic, we do have some dedicated teams. We call it the CDA team, Consumer Data Accelerator, that's really keeping an eye on it 24/7 and thinking of new ways for us to be able to collect that data, organize the data, and then hopefully action it mostly in the form of media.
What would you say, just a quick kind of follow-up, what about like personalization? Like I think I liken it to, Oreo, you can create your own Oreo, right, and your own logo, and like we've done similar things with the chapstick brand, which we recently sold. But I thought that was also really unique. Like I didn't appreciate that as the social marketer. Like I saw that, I'm like, oh, that's an interesting way to build trust and to get people to basically commit data and find a way to there's a clear value exchange.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you think about that for personal, especially for a brand like Oreo, which I think immediately jumps top of mind for personalization?
Yeah, no, I think it's a great insight, and it's actually what we built our DTC platform around. It's that everyone has their own way to Oreo, whether it's, you're Oreoing because you're vegan, or if you need your twist.
One of the first things I found out when I was vegan is that Oreos.
It's good news. You can eat an Oreo. But it's really rooted in the inside of the brand. People are eating it in different ways, whether it's twist, lick, or dunk, or you're dunking it in milk, or people are doing the fork thing with the milk now. So it's really rooted in that insight first and foremost, and I think that's where you can offer value. I think other ways we've seen it, we did for a period of time have a DTC for Sour Patch Kids as well, and it was similar insight where you could make your own mix. If you like all green kids or all red kids, you could make that custom mix for yourself as well. So I do think personalization is just a way to get people engaged and offer that value exchange for the data.
Yeah, awesome. Katie, I would love to turn this to you. I think you were in such a really interesting business. And I remember because I wasn't familiar with Little Saints, but I think the whole like functional beverage, non-alcoholic, really kind of interesting convergence. And as larger CPG marketers, I think like we compete in 7 major categories, but there's a lot of categories we don't. And I find like we're constantly kind of gathering inspiration from what smaller companies are able to do and produce. And I think like there's many advantages to being a smaller, scrappier brand and company. Also difficulties, I'm sure, which you'll share. But would love to hear your thoughts on first-party data collection, right? Especially when you have to be scrappy and, timing is everything, right? And acting on the wrong data sets you back, another week after that. Like I feel like we've all been there, but I would love to hear your perspective, especially coming from such a unique business.
Yeah, so being a direct-to-consumer business, we're almost kind of cheating when it comes to zero first and probably also second-party data as well. These things are all kind of converged together. and that they're really built into the DNA of our company. And so, I mean, we started out actually like wholesale retail first, and the category itself was just way too new. And so we very quickly had to pivot into being direct to consumer in order to survive. Like we would have had a 6-month runway had we not made that really quick pivot. But I mean, every single time somebody checks out, we're collecting email address, phone number, we have contact, or that we have their location. And so it's like when we have all of those things, we can I just kind of had a little brain moment and lost my train of thought. Bear with me for 1 second. But it's like when we have all of that information, we can set up predictive analytics, so we can really easily retarget them. And then we also have a really clear idea who our audience is so that we can move off of them very, very quickly and easily. So yeah, we're existing at the bottom of the funnel basically all of the time until we get up to a certain valuation, to which point we can really extend and move more to the top of the funnel. But yeah, it's really baked into the DNA of who Little Saints is at this point.
Yeah, and I think that's really important too when you think about like, you know, big companies like us, I feel like the focus has always been, right, we want to market to everyone. I think in many ways that's a mistake, you know, and that's where like we start to kind of compete over share, right, and innovation. Right? How do you innovate on Advil, right, in a category that's pretty much been unchanged for the last 40, 50 years, you know, and so like that's what I also think is like your category is definitely just prime for disruption. Because you know your customers better, because there's not as many. I think in many ways, like that's an advantage. And I've learned so much from DTCs who kind of share that same point of view. But Robyn, I'd love to turn it over to you too. Again, I feel like it's so easy, like when you're in like the biscuit confectionery, like it's easy to delight people. Like there's very clear like stimulus and triggers and why and desire as to why people want to engage with your brand. But where do you see the value of first party data and like maybe some of the challenges that you guys are seeing as you try to scale up and beyond, you know, the brands and the current work that you do today?
Yeah, we are primarily focused on retail. 99.5% of our business is in retail, but that 0.5% is so important to me because that's where I mine all of our insights from. Like, I'm kind of a old brand nerd where I just love data insights. So that is where I've learned so much about our brand. Because we are an allergen-free brand, we have so many micro tribes that kind of evangelize us because they can't have gluten because they have PCOS, or CrossFitters love us because they want a clean ingredient label, but yet can, eat an entire package of cookie dough in one sitting because they burn so many calories. So you have the spectrum of all these really interesting micro niche segments that are interested in our brand. So I mine these datas and then go and, how do I find more of them, right? So that's where I partner with. We actually partner with a key on a lot of our campaigns because they are able to get to such a personalized, customized, creative campaign for us that can deliver the right message to the right audience member at the right time. So that's kind of, for me, it's all about the insights that we get from the first party data.
And that's, I think, a recurring theme. I think no matter what size you are, right? I mean, like once you know your customers, you have deeper insight, right? It just drives better action. But I think this also ties really closely to loyalty, right, and fandom, and the communities that all of our brands kind of create, or that are kind of created on their own. That's one of the things that's so interesting, just kind of through the work that I do in social listening, is that communities form themselves all on their own, right? But where's the opportunity to co-create, right? To build that loyalty and fandom, because that's how you build trust. And this kind of goes back to the last presentation we did on Zero Party, right? Without trust, I mean, how can you expect people to give you their data, right? People want better experiences, and they want to give brands a chance. But as brands, sometimes, we make mistakes, and we don't necessarily act with their interests in mind. Right? We're not really consumer-led, but we're trying, and I think so many of us are. But I'll toss it right back to you, Robyn, like where do you see the opportunity to use that fandom? And maybe it's repurposing it into, and Katie, I'd love to hear your thoughts after this too, on email or CRM, right? I feel like there's all this data that you kind of see that, traditionally third-party marketers like me, like I don't have as much insight into. I feel like it's so important. I hear echoes of that more and more. So where do you see the opportunity of that, using the fandom that exists, the people who can eat a whole roll of cookie dough in one sitting, which is pretty impressive. Like, where's the opportunity to lean in and co-create with those people? Get them involved with the brand.
Absolutely. So we launched an ambassador program about 1.5 years ago, and that's where we just completely seed product. Really, this is where we're generating a lot of great UGC content. It's kind of our, I would say, we're trying to test out certain creators that we like to work with by giving them free product, and then if they perform well, we will actually go into paid campaigns with them. So we started off with every couple of months we have a new campaign that opens up, and The first time we had over 100 people sign up for 20 spots, and it continues to grow and grow. Now we have over 1,000 people trying to apply into our ambassador programs, for which we have about 100 spots per quarter.
Wow.
So, by that we are able to generate a lot of great UGC content, be able to kind of understand this funnel of who we want to use as paid influencers as well. So it's a really, really kind of really great win-win situation.
Yeah, and influence as a proxy. We'll come back to this too, but Katie, I would love to hear your thoughts too. So I thought you had a great example, and again, as someone I think who's a little closer to email marketing, which I don't appreciate enough. Like every time I run into email marketing, I'm like, oh, it is personalized, and there's so much more to it. And that's, I think, just the silo of being a social media marketer. But would love to, I thought you had great insight into how you build fandom, and again, kind of tied back to first-party data collection, where that's been a really effective method for some companies.
Totally. Email marketing is not dead. I've heard a lot of people try to claim that email marketing is dead, the SMS marketing is dead, especially as it pertains to CPG, and that is not true. So I think there's a few different components here, one of which is really in terms of building trust with the customer, especially as an early brand. I think there's so many direct-to-consumer brands that are born, they create a product, they slap a brand on it, they throw it on the shelf, and they have a bunch of shiny photos of it. And it doesn't necessarily move product. And so what we've really try to tap into is like, we create a lot of open source content. And so it's like really going behind the brand. It is sharing right now we're on a very early stage movement to try to change the way that people think about socializing. There's a lot of people who are in the mushroom space who are wanting to also be a part of that mission. And so they're curious as to what are all of the struggles and the things that we are going through basically as we're working to kind of build on that mission. And so we share the good, the bad, and the ugly that's happening behind closed doors. And I think people really trust us because of it. And so when it comes to email, is people are wanting to jump on the email list because they're wanting to learn more about what's actually going on. And so we have roughly 100,000 people on our email list. They're super active. We have a 60 to 70% open rate on average, which is higher than any brand I think I've ever worked on. But we've launched we did a new flavor launch, an espresso martini, the first espresso martini fueled by mushrooms, exclusively through email. We did not put a single paid dollar behind it, and we sold through that run in under a month. And so the power of email, it's still there, it still works.
If I could I just add to that?
Go.
Yeah, well, I love that. And I think just, Katie brings up a good point around access. And it reminds me, we did something similar with the Lady Gaga Oreo that we did in 2020. It's one of my favorite projects, still is. But something that we know that's true about this kind of fandom, these communities, is that people want to be the first to know about something or the first to get their hands on it. So similar to what you're saying of how can you give that value back in terms of access or exclusives? So in the context of that promotion, we actually launched what we called a stand club, where we offered early tips and hints about when the product was going to drop and let that group be the first to know. And that did really well in terms of driving new subscribers. So just, I thought it was a great example of access and exclusives being a way to engage people and get that subscriber base built up.
Yeah, and this is another really great point we like to talk about, right, is FOMO, right, and exclusive marketing. This is one of the things I've kind of picked up from, I can't go to many of these events, is that, and we've seen it too with smaller scale activations, and PepsiCo did one, I forget if it was Cheetos or Pringles, there was one activation where I remember the person from PepsiCo, they asked, how many people do you think signed up for this 6-hour tentpole activation in FiDi or somewhere in Manhattan? And people were guessing, in the hundreds, thousands. And I think they said they had 22,000 people on the wait list. And you talk about fandom, and again, I wish I could remember what brand it was, but I remember reading that, I'm that's kind of aspirational. I wish we had the ability to do that. Right, and you think about just the trust and just the affection, the brand loyalty, right? All the traditional things that we do in marketing and try to measure. I think that's a really kind of powerful tactic too, right? It's that's the result of fandom, and there is some augmentation between being digital and being in the real world, And so I think we'll move on to the smidge of social, which I love the titles too that I actually don't come up with, but I appreciate that as someone who has to sometimes write those in my deck, come up with something catchy. But it's hard to talk about media in any conversation, at any marketing event, without talking about social media. And we kind of touched upon that already, right? As a proxy to building trust and loyalty. And Robyn, I would love to toss this back to you, because I think ambassador programs, that's a new thing. But I think it's really powerful. Actually, I don't think it's a new thing. I think it's a resurging thing. Because I think, I forget if we were talking about this here, but, you look at a brand like Red Bull and GoPro, right, who invite their creators out, YouTube, right, in 2015, 2016. right? They gave an immersive experience to their creators because it was a proxy to their audience and trust in the brand, right? And that's why hundreds of millions of people use YouTube, right? And GoPro, right? And I feel like that's something that we can kind of bring back. Like there's an equivalent for our brands. I don't think it necessarily has to be as extreme as GoPro, but I would love to, and tying it back to first-party data, right? If you can build that trust, I really think that's kind of a bridge for us. So, and you were touching upon this before, Robyn, so I'd love to kind of hear more about how you're approaching ambassadorship as like a brand building tactic, as a data collection tactic, right? I mean, you just get to know your audience a little bit better. We'd love to hear you share more.
But as I mentioned, we have a lot of micro tribes that really kind of take our brand and make it their own. And that's the whole that's the entire intent of the ambassador programs, is because each of these micro tribes try our product and we give them carte blanche of what they want to do with it, really. And for us, like one of the key social media metrics that I gauge my brand with is engagement. You know, we can pay for followers, we can pay for reach, we can pay for impressions, but engagement is the one that I care the most about because of this, the fact that we want to create fandom, the fact that we want to create loyalty. And you know, we have a tracker where we have, for our brand, it's about 2.5% engagement rate, which is more than 5 times the engagement rates of our competitors in our category, and far surpasses much of the major F&B brands in the space. So that's kind of one of the reasons why I just feel that it's so important to focus on engagement, because really that's what's the secret sauce is to that fandom.
And I feel like we've been debating this internally. Is like the whole impressions versus engagement rate, right? Like the focus on the metrics that matter most. Like I feel like impressions, like for a long time, I didn't believe in until I started making content myself. And I'm like, there's people that see your content that never engage or like anything. And so that was like a switch for us. I'm like, oh, well, we've always kind of leaned toward engagement rate, which controls for followership, right? And it's just always kind of been a better measure. And like now I feel like marketers kind of debate this. And that's what's so challenging about social. It's really just figuring out what metrics to follow, right? How to drive and which ones to trust. I was literally working through that last week. I'm like, there's some data issues and errors, and it's really, really challenging. And Loren, I'd love to toss this back to you, because I look at your brands regularly, and on social, I forget how many followers Oreo and Sour Patch, like some of them have millions and millions of followers on Twitter and YouTube, right, and like all the kind of major social media apps. I think like you're riding a wave of fandom that's existed for so long, right? So like you're not on square one, you're really more on square like 20. But I feel like there's some challenges to that too, right? Is like once you get to 2 million followers, that jump to 3 million followers is even harder, right? And I would love to hear some kind of insight, especially because you worked on the brand marketing side, like where you see the opportunity to continue to double down on social, especially when you think of the abundance of data in UGC and all the great things that we've kind of covered today.
Yeah, I think it's a good question. I think for us, it's really about momentum, and it's true. Like we're always, especially I was senior brand manager of Oreo for a couple years back in like 2020-ish times, and that's when we were really rocket shipping our social presence. We had gotten on TikTok, and we were pretty early as one of the first brands to get onto TikTok, and that really paid dividends for us. So I think it's a combination of being smart and brave, and like knowing where to play, when to get in on it, and also just having a really authentic voice that people will connect with. So I think Oreo's a good example of being a brand that isn't afraid to say something or to take a stand on certain things, and I think that builds an authenticity with followership. But I do think there's something to your point around once you have a certain level of followers, you're kind of beating yourself every day of like, how do I, beat that benchmark and continue to grow it? But I think just being really authentic to the voice of the brand, having something to say, and like using your platforms, again, going back to the exclusives, the access, like having the ability to connect to the brand, I think connects with people. One example I'll point to quickly is a couple years ago we did a mashup. You guys may have seen it with Ritz and Oreo, where we basically put the two together, and it's kind of this really sweet and salty. It's actually really good. It sounds weird, but it's really good. And we launched it on social, dropped it exclusively on direct-to-consumer, and it sold out within minutes. So I think doing things like that that are surprising, that are delightful, that offers some kind of exclusive or access is definitely something that continues to keep the momentum going on social.
Yeah, awesome. And I'd love to turn to you, Katie, because too, I think it's almost the opposite challenge, right? It's like, I feel like you see like some really impressive metrics, and rightfully so. I feel like when you're hidden, and we see this with some of our smaller brands, like we have established brands, but some of them are pretty new to social. And I'm like, and we're getting our butts kicked in some cases by just better creative, better copy, better targeting. And I thought you had some great examples of like how you're seeing really effective results through social. Especially, again, through a category that's non-alcoholic, so like you're clearly not like, just different rules, regulations, And right, you have the uniqueness of being a small agile brand. So growing from 100 followers to 5,000 followers, I feel like that's such a different journey. And like we don't know what to do because like that's so new to us. But I feel like when you're we work with a founder-led company, right, your boots on the ground, you have much more insight and perspective into what it takes to build that audience so that when you get to 1 million followers, right, you have deeper insight, you know what works, you know what doesn't work. And that's like all the growth hacking, right? That's everything in social. That's how people have built million person followings. Would love to hear your thoughts because I know you've had some effective results on social.
You know, our social journey has been kind of interesting in that when we first started, we had a number of agencies who we were working with, and I mean, we're working with pretty small budgets as well. So we have agencies who are very, very part-time with us. We were getting very mediocre results. I think I came in and we had like roughly 5,000 followers. And we decided at some point that we were gonna like clear out all of the agencies and we were gonna just do it ourselves, which meant that we had some cool partnerships with MML. So we had a number of cool hotels that we were in, and we just started like traveling around taking photos ourselves and doing all of the content ourselves, which was a lot. And I mean, when you really boil it down, it's like, okay, you're gonna have a few times a month that you're going and collecting a lot of content, and then you're just teeing it up once a week and having it all kind of set out to post. But I think there was something about the authenticity of that for a while where it was like, okay, this is authentic, real content. It's not shiny, it's not overly polished. And I think right now we were having a conversation last night about kind of the polished content versus not. And we've more recently dabbled into doing some more polished content. It never performs. It doesn't perform well on organic. It doesn't perform well on paid. And so it's people are wanting stuff to feel very native and in feed. And so we saw a ton of growth as soon as we started taking over social ourselves. And then once you turn on paid advertising as well, that also boosts organic engagement if done correctly. And so it was really kind of the trifecta of, or I guess, dual-fecta, is that a word?
I thought you were going to say dual.
We're going to make it one, of doing it ourselves for a while just to kind of get momentum going. And we have a part-time girl who's taken social back over, but we're still very, very hands-on with it. But that and paid, and really just being like really hands-on with paid and going in and commenting too on paid leads people directly into organic, and so it kind of creates this nice little flywheel.
Awesome. Well, we talked about a lot of things, and we're going to turn to Q&A just in the last couple of minutes we have here. But Robyn, Loren, Katie, phenomenal. I mean, we could have taken this conversation for another hour, so hopefully that was enjoyable for everyone. So we'll go ahead and.
Anybody have any quick?
Am I picking?
Okay.
Hi, I'm Kate from Bushes. I have a question for Loren. You were talking about how you use the personalization to drive your first-party data and engagement in general. Do you guys internally look at those more as sales channels, or do you look at them more as marketing channels?
It's a great question. That's been the great debate for years. I see it as both. I see it as an equity builder, honestly, primarily, and a sales channel. Like, it's never going to be as big as Walmart, right? Like, it's going to have a limit. I think it's more about how does it offer some way to extend the equity of a brand in a way that a retail relationship cannot. So it's things like offering really premium Oreos. Like, we actually launched weddings, or personalized Oreo for weddings last year. So that's not something that would traditionally live in a retail space. So yes, I think it is a balance, but I do see it primarily as an equity driver, as a means of expanding into occasions you otherwise wouldn't be, and then also offering unique consumer experiences as they're coming into that part of the consumer journey.
One more here.
Hi, everyone. Nolan Johnson, Grocery TV. Quick question for you on the concept of data. I just was curious, as you guys were digging into all the data that you have available to you, was there anything that really stood out and was really surprising? Like, was there like any like fun nugget that you got from digging through the data that you used in your marketing strategies or anything like that? I'm just curious if you have any like fun stories or really like fun data points that you found.
Turn that to one of you.
I mean, something about our audience that I found very interesting, and we had a lot of advisors and also investors early on who were really pushing us to be targeting Gen Z, because Gen Z is drinking less than any other generation, so it seemed like the obvious place to target. And when we were first starting paid, we were kind of just throwing stuff out, and it's finding the audience essentially for you. And the audience that has really stuck has been 45 to 54-year-old women in affluent suburban areas. And we kind of pared this down or figured out that it was because it's women who are perimenopausal, and so they don't want to drink and have hangovers. And so in terms of catering content to them, we've done little bits of that, but we've found it really doesn't make that big of an incremental difference. And so we are sticking to kind of more of like a broad communication strategy, but we were not expecting that audience to be as prominent as they were, so.
I have a good couple of good stories, actually. We were, back in the day, said that, you know, people were inviting us to weddings, our founder to their wedding, or we got, you know, people telling us that they named their baby Loren because they loved our cookies so much. So we're seeing this rise of like consumers contacting us to sponsor their wedding or their bachelorette parties. So now we're going to be doing a campaign really to be like, you know, pitch your wedding and we will come and, you know, cater your wedding for you. So that is going to be an upcoming campaign for us because we're seeing such an insurgence of people asking us to sponsor their events these days. And maybe we'll do a name your baby Loren and we will give you a lifetime supply of cookies or something.
It's a good name.
Danny, we're going to continue this in roundtable at the end of the morning. Danny, ladies, thank you so much.
Thank you.